I think the key recent development with regards to defence spending in China, certainly over the last few years, has been that we've seen growth slow down. But at the same time, we're still seeing very large increases in defence expenditure. Growth between 2015 and 2018 was around 7 to 8% a year. The decade before that, it was growing at 13% a year. But that 8% growth is still a robust increase for a defence budget, certainly the size of China's. And to put that into context, in 2018, we saw defence expenditure in China increase by $13 billion, and that's the equivalent to more than Taiwan's entire defence budget. So still robust increases despite this slowdown. Another key trend that relates closely to that as well is that under President Xi Jinping, we've also seen a slight increase in defence expenditure as a share of GDP, for only very slight at the moment, from 1.2% to 1.3% over the last 5 years or so. But at the same time, what that suggests is that under Xi Jinping, we are seeing defence become more of a prioritised area. Yeah, so I think recent trends certainly suggest that in the future what we'll see is more money diverted towards modernisation, also to operational expenses as well. And I think the 2016 and 2017 budgets were really instructive in that regard. You had a situation where the defence budget was still growing by 7 to 8% a year, while at the same time the PLA was being reduced by around 300,000 personnel, which is around 10%, well, more than 10% of its strength. So what this suggests certainly is that we're starting to see money diverted away from personnel expenses and towards other areas of expenditure. Another area this alludes to is that we're starting to see more money diverted towards the Air Force and the Navy. The Navy in particular has seen significant investment over the recent years. And this is really all part of a wider process of trying to shift the PLA from its traditional role as very much focused on territorial defence to one that's able to project power into the region and further afield, in line with China's more global role. And I think that obviously that's a very long-term process, and that's why we think that this will be a very long-term trend. So I think in terms of the impact of the Chinese defence budget on the rest of the Asia-Pacific region, I think the first thing to note is that there's nothing intrinsically aggressive about what China's doing. Chinese defence expenditure continues to grow in line with GDP and in line with its growing global role. And it remains quite low, certainly in relative terms compared to GDP and as a share of government expenditure. At the same time, China's defence budget does dwarf that of its neighbours, and the gap is growing between Asia-Pacific as a region and China. And based on our projections, we expect that China will actually outspend the rest of Asia-Pacific on defence by around 2027. Now, at the moment, we're not seeing much of a response, certainly in terms of defence spending in neighbouring countries around China. Defence spending is normally stable, if not falling, against GDP and government spending among most of its neighbouring countries. But we may see a slight shift there as Chinese military power starts to project further into the region. But I think in reality, the sheer scale of the Chinese defence budget means that there's no realistic way that any of these countries can compete with China's defence budget in resourcing terms.